I was always drawn to heroes, though you wouldn't guess it looking at me now. Comic books, blockbuster movies, I devoured them all as a kid, dreaming of saving the day. Reality had other plans. These days, I'm just James Miller, the guy who speaks fluent Python but stumbles over small talk. My workspace is my sanctuary, jewel monitors casting a soft blue glow, lines of code marching across the screen. Here, I'm a different person. I see patterns others miss, craft solutions that make our systems hum. I can dive deep into the logic of a problem and emerge with something elegant and efficient, a solution the rest of the team couldn't even conceptualize. My code sings, its poetry and its efficiency. In this space, I'm powerful. But the second I step out of it, that's when things fall apart. My desk is meticulously organized. Everything has its place, and my workflow is optimized like a well-oiled machine. It's all a delicate dance of logic and precision, just like the code I write. Yet somehow, that precision doesn't translate into real-world interactions. Outside of my desk, I'm clumsy and hesitant. I see the world in algorithms, not conversations. I can write a program to solve any problem, but I can't seem to find the right words during a simple chat. It's like I'm speaking a different language than everyone else. The office buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy. Sarah from marketing laughed way too loudly at a joke again. The espresso machine hissed and sputtered in the break room like it always does, desperately trying to keep up with the demand for caffeine. My boss, Mr. David, stopped by my desk. His shadow fell across my keyboard, blocking the glow of my monitors. "James," he sighed, a note of frustration creeping into his voice. "The team meeting's in 5 minutes. I need you to present your findings on the database optimization project." My throat tightened. It always does. "I have the slides," I managed, the words coming out a little too quiet. I knew they were thorough. I knew my solution was rock solid. I knew the changes I'd made were revolutionary, streamlined processes that would save countless hours of wasted time and effort. It was a monumental task that I'd completed without hesitation, in my own little space, meticulously crafting something perfect. But presenting? That's when all the confidence evaporates under the harsh fluorescent lights and the weight of everyone's stares. My carefully constructed thoughts, so logical and clear in my head, devolve into a jumble of nervous stutters and awkward silences. That's when she walked in. Amelia Thompson, our new project manager. Her heels clicked against the floor, a sharp, decisive sound that seemed to demand attention. Her eyes scanned the office, assessing, calculating. She looked at me, and I felt myself shrink under her gaze. It was like I was under a microscope. I knew I was being measured, and I knew with a sickening certainty that I was coming up short. I could feel the heat of her assessment. "James Miller," she said, her voice crisp, like the snap of a well-worn leather briefcase. "I've heard about your performance." The pause before that last word spoke volumes, like she was using the term loosely, barely tolerating it. My stomach dropped. I mumbled something unintelligible, fingers tracing the scar through my sleeve, a nervous habit I couldn't seem to shake. My talent was obvious, I knew it was, but my inability to articulate it was equally obvious. It was like I was two different people, the coding genius and the awkward mess that couldn't talk to save his life. She moved on, her attention sliding past me, a clear dismissal that stung far more than I cared to admit. The thing is, in my dreams, I'm still that hero. Still the person who runs toward danger. I see the solutions, I see the pathways, the elegant code. In those moments, I see myself clearly, the potential that I know is there. But in this office, under the weight of other people's expectations, I'm just not. Reality is fluorescent lights and awkward silences, codes that sing but words that stutter. Reality is watching someone like Amelia Thompson command a room with a natural ease, while I fade into the background, just another cog in the machine. Back at my desk, my fingers found their rhythm on the keyboard. Code flowed, solutions emerging from chaos. This was my element. It was where I could breathe. A notification popped up. Another meeting request from Amelia. My stomach knotted. It was always the meetings that got to me. My comfort zone was shrinking by the day. "Your coding skills are impressive," she said when I entered her office. Each word measured and precise. The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, creating long, accusing shadows that seemed to highlight my every flaw. But this role requires more than just technical expertise. We need someone who can lead, someone who can inspire confidence in our clients. I wanted to tell her about the patterns I saw, the innovative solutions waiting to be born. I wanted her to see the hero lurking beneath the quiet engineer. I wanted to tell her all the things I couldn't articulate in a group setting. I wanted her to see what I could do in my element. Instead, I just nodded, my mouth suddenly dry as sand. Her eyes swept over me again, a thorough examination that left me feeling exposed. "The quarterly review is coming up," she continued, shuffling papers as if I wasn't there. "I need you to step up, James. Show some initiative. Leadership potential." The subtext was clear. Shape up or be left behind. That she was evaluating me, and I wasn't measuring up. Days blurred after that. I buried myself in code, seeking refuge in the cool logic of algorithms. But doubt crept in, like a virus corrupting my system. Every solution felt inadequate, haunted by Amelia's judgment. It felt like I was being forced to become someone I wasn't, that I would never be good enough. I kept seeing the glint of disappointment in her eyes when I stumbled through those meetings, and it was eating away at my confidence piece by piece. The company retreat was announced on a Wednesday, tacked onto the office notice board. 3 days of team building in the mountains. My personal version of hell. Mr. David made it clear attendance wasn't optional. "It's important for team cohesion, Miller," he'd said, completely oblivious to how deeply that idea terrified me. Trapped in the woods with my coworkers was the last place I wanted to be. But the threat, in Amelia's words, was real enough to force me to go. I packed the basics and a company-branded polo shirt I'd never worn. The drive up was torture, trapped in a van with chattering colleagues, all of them seemingly more comfortable with each other than I was with anyone. The constant conversation was exhausting. The retreat center was a clearing with log cabins. Pine trees stood tall and imposing around the edges. I claimed a bottom bunk in a secluded cabin, eager to be away from the noise and the constant pressure. Maybe in the woods, away from the office and the judging eyes, I could finally figure out how to become who everyone expected me to be. I've been to enough team-building retreats to know they're all the same. Forced camaraderie, awkward icebreakers, and the pretense that we're more than just colleagues grinding through project deadlines. This one was no different. Pine trees towered around our campsite, casting long shadows. The campfire crackled, sending sparks into the darkening sky. Our team sat in a loose circle. Marketing chatted with engineering. Sales strategists traded jokes with development. I was the quiet one, nursing a marshmallow, listening more than speaking. Amelia sat across from me, firelight on her face. Even relaxed, she radiated a controlled energy. She discussed our latest project with Mark from HR, her gestures precise. I watched her, fascinated by how different she seemed here compared to the offices after, yet still commanding. The night air was crisp. Wood smoke mixed with the scent of pine and s'mores. Conversation hummed around me, but tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was the firelight. Maybe it was the wind picking up. I felt it before I saw it. A shift in the air. The wind gusted, carrying a hint of something volatile. An ember lifted from the campfire. Time seemed to slow. The ember drifted. Dry grass. Late summer heat. The first flame was faint. Most people didn't notice. A tiny orange flicker. But I saw it. My burned arm tingled, a phantom sensation of heat. "Wind's picking up," I muttered. Something in my tone caught Amelia's attention. She glanced my way. Then chaos erupted. The grass exploded into flame. Not a gradual spread, but a sharp, fast consumption. Screams erupted. Chairs toppled. People scrambled. My body remembered before my mind did. The heat, the smoke, the terror of being trapped. I was 8 years old again in that burning apartment complex. Panic spread. People scattered. Shouts overlapped. Beneath the chaos, I heard a cry. My eyes locked onto Amelia. She had stumbled, her composure shattered. She was falling, closer to the flames. I saw the terror in her body. The fire roared. Dry grass turned to kindling, flames leaping from one patch to another. The wind fed the blaze. My left arm burned. Not just the scar, but a deeper memory. The apartment fire, the little girl, the grandmother. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but something else was happening. Something inside me was rising, pushing past the fear. The kid who once dreamed of being a hero. The part of me that had saved that girl years ago. He wasn't gone. He was right here. I moved. Not a hesitation, but a pure, instinctive lunge. My body remembered how to act when seconds counted. The heat hit me. Smoke billowed. But I'd been here before. I knew how to move. Amelia hadn't moved. She was frozen. Her professional armor had crumbled. In that moment, she wasn't a project manager. She was just a person facing danger. "Amelia!" My voice cut through the roar, sharp, commanding. She looked up. Our eyes met. Something shifted. I reached her. The heat was intense. My burned arm throbbed, but I didn't stop. I grabbed her shoulder. I pulled her away. The flames seemed to rise, but I'd faced fire before, and I wasn't losing anyone today. We tumbled backward, away from the flames. Heat seared my back, but I didn't stop moving until we were clear. Smoke clung to my clothes, my hair. My lungs burned. Memories flooded back. The apartment, the screams, the tiny hand I'd once held. Amelia was breathing hard, her composure shattered. Her hair was wild, her outfit streaked with ash. She looked up at me. "You?" She started, then stopped. Shock, recognition, something deeper. Around us, the team mobilized. Fire extinguishers appeared. Someone called emergency services, but in that moment, it was just the two of us. The fire continued its destructive dance. My left arm throbbed, the old scar burning. I felt Amelia watching me. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice rough. She nodded, but her eyes never left my arm. The camp dissolved into controlled chaos. Our team lead coordinated evacuation, but we remained in our own bubble. Paramedics arrived. Standard protocol. But I could see Amelia was somewhere else. As the fire was contained, I felt something had changed, not just in the landscape, but between us. Between me and Amelia. She touched my arm, the burned one, gently. "We need to talk," she said. Not a request, a statement. The way she said it told me this was about more than tonight's fire. This was about something deeper. The company retreat had promised team building, but it delivered something unexpected, a moment of revelation. As we sat there, I knew nothing would be the same. The quiet engineer, the confident manager, our paths had just intersected, and something extraordinary was about to begin. In the distance, emergency lights flashed. The fire was out, but our story was just beginning. The morning after the fire felt surreal. Sunlight filtered through the pine trees. I sat alone at a picnic table, my left arm bandaged. My coffee was cold. Amelia approached, her professional clothes replaced by a soft green sweater and jeans. She looked different, more approachable, less sharp. The fire seemed to have changed her. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the seat beside me. I nodded, suddenly feeling vulnerable. Last night's heroics felt like a dream. The engineer who rarely spoke wasn't supposed to be the guy who rushed into flames. She sat down, her movements deliberate. Her eyes studied my bandaged arm. "Does it hurt?" Her question was softer than before. "Not really," I lied. The old scar was burning, memories flickering. Amelia reached out, her fingers hovering above the bandage. "May I?" Her voice was tentative. I nodded again. Her touch was gentle as she pulled back the bandage, revealing the scar. It was a map of an old trauma. "It's from the fire," I said. "The one I told you about last night. When I was a kid." She traced the scar's edge. Something in her expression changed recognition, and something else. "James," she said, her voice catching. "Tell me about that fire, every detail." So I did. I told her about the apartment building, the summer night when everything changed, how I was just a kid, how the smoke alarm started screaming, how I found a girl and her grandmother trapped. With each word, her hand stayed near my scar, her eyes growing wider. I described pulling them through the smoke, how the grandmother was too weak, how I'd wrapped the little girl in my jacket, how we'd made it out, but not without cost me arm burned, the grandmother collapsing outside. And then Amelia whispered something that made the world stop. "James," she said, "that child, that was me." The world narrowed, sound faded, just Amelia's words hanging in the air. "What?" I managed, barely a whisper. Her fingers trembled. "I remember that night. I was 7. My grandmother and I lived in that apartment building on Maple Street. The fire." She stopped. I watched her change. The confident project manager was gone, replaced by a vulnerable woman. Her eyes glistened. "The young boy who saved us," she continued. "I never knew his name. I only remembered glimpses of smoke, fear, and then this figure pulling us through the flames. My jacket was your jacket. You protected me." My mind reeled. That girl I'd saved, the one I'd wondered about, was sitting right here. Not just sitting, she was Amelia Thompson, my project manager, the woman I'd rescued last night. "Your grandmother," I said softly. "She didn't make it, did she?" A tear escaped. "No, she collapsed outside. The paramedics tried, but the coincidence was impossible. Yet, here we were. 2 lives, intersected by trauma, by survival. The scar on my arm felt less like a mark of pain and more like a connection. "I always wondered," I said, "what happened to you, if you were okay. I carried that night with me." Amelia reached out, finally touching my scar. Not with pity, with recognition, gratitude, connection. "You did more than enough," she whispered. You saved my life. Twice, actually. The professional barriers seemed meaningless now. We were survivors, connected by something more than any work project. Around us, the campsite began to wake up, but we remained in our own bubble. I looked at Amelia, Lee looked at her. The manager, the project lead, she was also that scared girl I'd rescued, and I was the quiet engineer who had been carrying this moment all these years. What are the chances? I murmured. She smiled. Some things aren't about chance. They're about destiny. The moment lingered. I've carried guilt about my grandmother for years, Amelia said. She raised me. And then I lost her that night. I understood guilt. I'm sorry, I said. She squeezed my hand. My whole life, Amelia continued, I've been driven by something I couldn't explain, always pushing forward, never staying still, always trying to protect others. Maybe that's why I became a project manager, to control chaos, to prevent disasters. The insight struck me, how trauma shapes us, how survival becomes a blueprint. And me? I asked. The quiet engineer who avoids attention? You became someone who sees patterns, she said. Someone who understands complex systems, someone who knows how to solve problems. We sat in silence. Mr. David approached. Miller, Thompson, we need to discuss the fire incident. His tone was different, respectful. Amelia straightened, her professional persona sliding back. But something had changed. Her eyes held a depth of understanding. As we walked toward the meeting area, she leaned close. We're not just talking about the retreat fire, she whispered. We're talking about two fires, two moments that changed everything. I felt something shift inside me. Years of hiding, of minimizing myself, all of that was crumbling. The reserved engineer was becoming something more. The day stretched before us, full of debriefings. But beneath the official proceedings, something profound was taking root, a connection forged in fire. As we walked, our hands brushed, not accidentally, not entirely intentionally, but with a sense of inevitability. The burned campsite stood as a reminder to survival, to connection, to the unexpected ways our past shapes our present. I never expected things to change so much after the retreat. But there I was at the whiteboard, markers squeaking as I sketched my latest software idea. The difference? This time I wasn't mumbling or second-guessing myself. Amelia leaned forward, her eyes intense. That's brilliant, James, she said, and my stomach did that flip it had started doing whenever she smiled at me. The automated failover system could save us months of work. The old me would have gone back to my desk after the presentation. Instead, I added details, my voice growing stronger. A few coworkers nodded. Mr. David, watching, looked surprised. After the meeting, Amelia caught up with me. You're changed, she said, reaching for a coffee mug. Her sleeve brushed my arm, over the scar, and neither of us pulled away. Good change. Having someone believe in you changes things, I replied, surprising myself with my directness. Her cheeks flushed. We fell into a rhythm. Late nights working on projects turned into takeout dinners at our desks. Professional discussions drifted into personal territory. She'd catch my eye across the table. I started looking forward to Mondays. One evening, she sat on the edge of my desk. Remember when you thought I was just a pushy manager? She asked, grinning. Remember when you thought I was just an antisocial coder? I countered, making her laugh. Her laughter did something to my chest. I looked at her, at the way her hair caught the light. The world seemed to narrow down to just us. Then her phone buzzed. Conference call with Tokyo, she said, standing up. but she hesitated, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Dinner tomorrow? Not at our desks?" My heart hammered. "Like a date?" She smiled, that confident smile. "Exactly like a date, James Miller." As I watched her walk away, I realized I'd found something worth being brave for. The change in our relationship spread through the office. In meetings, people watched us. We tried to keep things professional, but something had shifted. "Your proposal for the new security protocol, Mr. David said, catching me by the coffee machine. "That was impressive." He paused. "I always knew you had it in you. Sometimes people just need the right motivation." I thanked him. Back at my desk, I found a note from Amelia. "Lunch? That Thai place you mentioned?" I smiled, remembering our dinner date, how her hand had found mine across the table. During lunch, we found a quiet corner. Amelia was talking about my new security protocol when she stopped. "You're staring," she said, but her smile took any sting out of it. "Sorry," I replied. "It's just, I can't believe how things turned out. That little girl from the fire growing up to be," I gestured vaguely. She reached across the table, tracing the scar on my arm. "A pushy project manager who fell for the once timid hero who saved her life." Back at the office, we worked with renewed energy. Being together made everything clearer. My code flowed better, her project management became more precise. We were in sync. During a debugging session, Amelia brought me coffee, no words needed. Later, when she was stressed, I gave her a chocolate bar. Tiny gestures, but each one felt important. One evening, as the office emptied, I caught her looking at an old photo on her phone, her grandmother's face. Without thinking, I took her hand. She squeezed back. We didn't need to say anything. That's when I realized I wasn't just falling for Amelia, I was already there. The thought should have terrified me, but instead, it felt like coming home. More than our relationship was growing. Our team's productivity soared. Other departments started asking for our input. Mr. David even joked about our magic. During a late coding session, Amelia brought up something I'd been avoiding. "You know," she said, sitting on my desk, "you've never told me what happened to you after that fire. After you saved us." I leaned back, tracing my scar. "Spent a few weeks in the hospital. The burns weren't too bad, but the smoke." I paused. "I kept asking about you and your grandmother, but nobody knew anything." Her hand found mine. "I asked about you too, but everything was chaotic. After we lost Gran, we moved away." "I used to imagine all these different lives for you," I admitted, "hoping you were okay, that you were happy. And here I am." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Right where I was always meant to be." Our success at work continued. My security protocol earned recognition, and Amelia's leadership caught the attention of management. But the real victory was in the small moments, shared lunches, inside jokes, the way she'd straighten my collar before meetings, how I'd have her tea ready after calls. One night, after a successful project launch, Amelia leaned close. "Want to know a secret? I've been dreaming about our future." My heart skipped. "Yeah? A house with a big yard, maybe a dog, kids someday." She watched my reaction. "Too much?" I pulled her closer. "Not enough," I said. "Tell me more." That's when I knew that this wasn't just a romance or a connection born from trauma. This was something rare. The quiet engineer had found his voice, and the confident manager had found her heart's home. Looking at her, I saw our future stretching out before us. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but we'd face them together. The hero I'd dreamed of being as a kid, he was inside me all along. He just needed the right person to help him find his way out. The autumn breeze rustled through the cemetery maples, scattering leaves across the paths. I stood beside Amelia, our fingers intertwined, facing her grandmother's headstone. The small velvet box in my pocket felt heavy with promise, but something else weighed on my heart. "I need to tell you something," I said softly, my thumb brushing her knuckles. "Something I've carried too long." The wind danced around us. Amelia squeezed my hand, patient and present. The morning sun caught her hair, reminding me of the first day she walked into the office. That night, during the fire, my voice caught. "I heard your grandmother calling out. She was trying to make sure you got out first, but the smoke was so thick." The old guilt rose up. I couldn't get back to her. I tried, but... "James," Amelia said gently, "you were just a kid. You saved my life. But if I'd been faster, stronger..." The words I'd held back for years tumbled out. Maybe she'd be here today. Maybe she'd get to see. I pulled the ring box from my pocket. The past and the future collided in this space. Before I could drop to one knee, Amelia placed her hand over mine. "She is here," she whispered, a tear trailing down her cheek. "She's here in the way you protect me, in the way you love me, in the way you've always looked out for me, even before you knew who I was." She glanced at her grandmother's headstone. "And she's going to be here for what I need to tell you." My heart raced. She took my hand, the one with the ring box, and placed it against her stomach. "James," she said, her voice soft but sure, "we're going to have a baby." The world seemed to stop. My hand trembled against her stomach. Tears blurred my vision as I looked at Amelia, me savior, my love, the mother of my child. "If it's a girl," she continued, turning to face the headstone, "I thought maybe we could name her after Gran." Her voice wavered. Margaret rose. I couldn't speak for a moment. The ring box was still in my other hand. I finally dropped to one knee, looking up at her. "Marry me," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "Be my wife. Be the mother of our children. Be my partner in everything." I opened the box, revealing the ring. Amelia's answer was a tearful yes. We stood there, holding each other close. The autumn wind swirled leaves around us. My hand found its way back to her stomach. Looking at her grandmother's headstone, I made a silent promise. I would protect them both. The scared boy from the fire had grown into a man who understood that true heroism wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up, loving completely, and facing whatever came together. "Margaret Rose," I whispered. "It's perfect." Amelia leaned into me. Above us, the sun broke through the clouds. It felt like a blessing, like a grandmother's approving smile, like the beginning of something beautiful. The hero's journey I dreamed of had led me here, to this moment, to this love, and it was better than any story I could have imagined.